we had to try a lot of different things and a lot of different models, but I'm like, we're really happy with where we are right now.
Welcome everyone to another episode of TaxProTalk or hashtag TBT. Jim Buffington and Robbie Randall here. Who's our guest today, Robbie?
Hey everybody, today we have Lorilyn Wilson CPA. How's it going?
Good, good.
And today we're going to talk about bundled services and processes. I'm really interested in the why too. There's this piece of advisory services that I'm, as an advisor, so I work with large firms across the country, right? Top 100, top 200 firms across the country. And I'm going in and we're talking. There's this piece about advisory where you want to understand the client, what the client values, right? And then present that back to them in ways that are just incredibly meaningful. What I'm finding though is that the why conversations, the value conversations, even in the best of circumstances, when those are happening with stakeholders, there's really no good system to capture that data, share it with everyone internally to make sure we're all hyper-focused on that value to the client, and then share it back with the client along with the work that you're doing, right? Do you have any system for doing that? Do you have any thoughts on how that can be done effectively?
Honestly, I think in terms of effectiveness, you have to be set up for an engagement where it's more than just like, advisory is such like a wide approach. Like, what does it mean? Does it just mean you're available whenever they have questions? Does it mean you're proactively having monthly meetings? Because it's like, we have different tiers. And so it's depending on the tier is kind of how proactive we are. Whereas kind of our base tier, which we call core, it's like we're available whenever you have questions, but we're not really going to reach out and prod you on things unless it's like something we're seeing in your financials. We're like, this is weird, or hey, let's talk about adjusting payroll. Whereas it's like, the higher up you get in the more CFO type level and the more like concierge service, that's the level I feel like you have to get to because it's like not only figuring out the why, but like you said, it's the repeating their own why back to them, because business owners, they forget, and not because, they don't do it intentionally, but they get so caught up in running the day-to-day of your business. And so you need to kind of be on a communication level that you are constantly reinforcing that why back to them. And at, the lower levels, it doesn't really pencil out or make sense time-wise. And so I think you definitely, and when they're paying you more money, more often than not, they're going to have a closer relationship with you, and they are going to lean on you more as like, so for some of our clients, we are just kind of a glorified bookkeeper who happens to have a CPA license, and so they don't value as much as someone who's paying 4 times as what they're paying, what we have to say. And so I definitely think that regular communication, that higher level service, that more intimate involvement in their business and their numbers and kind of the day-to-day stuff is required if you're going to provide that level of service.
So thinking through, let's drill down a bit into the systems then. So let's say in the concierge level or CFO for hire level, we're capturing that data, which I think is wonderful. How is it captured? How do we share that internally? Or do you have systems and mechanisms to bring that through internally? Like, how's that work for you?
Yeah, so how we're set up, like how we striate things internally is we have at the top level is the relationship manager, which is the CPA. And the CPA is actually the only one having conversations with the client. No one else is, only because we're trying to make it simple for the client. They're like, I just go to this person, and then through us, they filter down. And so historically, we haven't really filtered down that information to the people who are entering the transactions or doing quality control on the books. Because it's like, they're looking for accuracy. They're not looking for context. And so then the RM, the relationship manager, can step in knowing the table's been set, knowing it's all right, and then apply the context to the situation and kind of do that higher level thinking.
I love it.
Yeah, I love that you have tiers of services too. Tell us more about kind of how you built out your tiers of service.
Yeah. So it's gone over many evolutions over the years. We've tried it every way that there's been to try it. We've tried it. When I first joined back in So I joined the firm back in 2014 and I became an owner in 2018. But it's actually my business partner's best friends with one of my, is married to one of my best friends from high school. So that's how I knew him. So that was my in. Like literally I'd gotten done working at a horrible firm and I reached out to him. I was like, hey, do you know anyone who's hiring? And his wife was like, you need to hire her. And so he's like, okay. He's like, you're hired. I'm like, oh, cool. But back then we're much smaller and it was the bookkeeping, payroll, tax, one monthly price, and one person pretty much servicing all those three things for your basket of clients. Okay. So it's like me running payroll for you and doing your tax return and doing your books and being your one source of contact. But then what happens is payroll's pretty complicated and quickly questions start to crop up as you grow and get bigger clients. It's just like, I can't do this. Like I can't answer these questions. Like there's some liability here. So then what we ended up doing is we created different swim lanes for tax, CAS, we'll call it client accounting services, and payroll. So we actually hired a payroll manager to manage all the payroll. And then we had people just dedicated to tax and people just dedicated to books. But then what happened was there's like communication issues going across, and some people are like, well, do I ask her or do I ask her? And does she communicate it to her? And so that also didn't work great as well. And so then we ended up chopping off payroll. We're like, payroll, we're not doing payroll anymore. And we literally had our payroll manager like take the whole payroll department. We're like, just keep servicing it, but you do it all. You can be our preferred provider, but we're like, we don't want to think about it anymore. Like this is way too much of a headache. And then we ended up partnering with a couple other CPAs to actually outsource most of the tax prep and review. And so we've kind of really honed in on the CAS. And then that's where it's like, okay. And then we sat down and we're like, okay, does it make sense to have the same person pulling bank statements, entering the stuff in QBO, doing payroll accruals, verifying their work, and then communicating with the client? And we're like, do spreadsheets and being like, okay, time allocation, where does this make sense? How much is this costing? And we're like, oh my gosh, there's so much inefficiency when you have, one person doing essentially 4 different roles. And so we're like, all right, let's divide out those 4 different roles. One person is in charge of doing payroll reports and bank statements. Just that one person pulls those. And then your next level up, we have one level who's just doing the actual like monthly bookkeeping process. And then the level up, you have the person who's actually doing the quality control on that and, communicating if there's anything that needs to be changed. And then that, like I said, that top tier is the relationship manager who's then stepping in and doing the CPA level or the CFO level analysis on everything. And it's like penciling that out in terms of like hours in and maximum clients you can, each position can handle. It made by far the most sense. Like that's where all the margin was by being able to kind of divvy out things in those striations.
That's a good way to think about it, build it out.
Mm-hmm. I love the iteration too. It does. You don't get it the first time. Maybe you do. But most folks, it takes an experiment, take the data, iterate, experiment, take the data, iterate. So I love that piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And is your firm all working in the same place or are they all spread out?
We kind of loosely were in the same place. Like we had a central office that people could come into, but now with, COVID, we're like, what everyone prefers. And it was we'd over the years kind of downsized. And to just save money on rent, the place where we were was really expensive. And we're like, we're going to save money on rent. And then we're all in this pretty tiny space, office sharing. And we're like, okay, we're all accountants and we're all too close to each other now. And so people ended up preferring to work from home. And so now actually today, later, we're going and doing the final clean out and we're just going to, pay a couple $100 a month to just have mail sent there and store some stuff. But otherwise we're just going to be completely virtual. And some of our people are moving out to different parts of Oregon. And some people are even looking at out of state, just with kind of getting away from the central hubs of the virus. And so luckily, we were already kind of on that path. So making that transition was very smooth and easy. All right. So how we display our services on our website is we do kind of the marketing 3. Like you have your 3 choices. And we intentionally, our core level is basically like your monthly bookkeeping, payroll accrual, and unlimited consulting. And so we intentionally, though, price that on the higher end because we don't want people to sign up for that service. Like, I tell people who call in who have pretty basic books, you know, we're doing a consult. I'm like, look, if this is all you need is just bookkeeping and you don't really value, you know, having a CPA on call, I'm like, you're gonna be overpaying. So I'm like, I do not. And I've told clients that like, who are my friends who, as we kind of scoped up our prices, and I'm like, look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I love working with you. You're so easy, but you're gonna be overpaying at this rate. So we intentionally price that kind of just basic books pretty high. And then all our prices are on our website. So anyone can go look at them. ilovecollective.com. And then the next tier is where we want to push people into. And so that is what we call Core Plus. So it includes the basic books, and then you get to choose 2 additional services. So these could be things like, you know, okay, we have a second company, we have an extra set of books, or we want help with AP or invoice tracking, like job costing. There's a whole menu, and it's literally like whatever you want for your business, you choose your 2 in addition to it. And that bump up in price is only $300. So like that's where people are like, oh, that's where the value is. So I tell people, I'm like, if you have need for these additional services, like this is where the value is. You're not going to find a better price, you know, if you're looking to get 3 services for this price. And then the next level up is kind of the enterprise level where it is customization, you know, multi-entity, or, you know, higher need, higher touch, or like, you know, an extravagant amount of AP that you need help with on a weekly basis or whatnot. And so that one is just kind of custom according to what the client needs. And we're kind of playing around with different things like, okay, like how should we actually price this? Should we do a revenue share model with them? And as they, you know, start with a fixed fee and then a percentage of revenue. And then as they grow, you know, our percentage of revenue becomes less or whatnot. And then we're like, are there actually some more kind of HR benefit things we want to start rolling in with that? And so we're kind of playing with what that enterprise model actually looks like. So that's a very fluid thing at this point. But our Core and Core Plus, which are, you know, very much your typical CAS systems you think about, those are very set and very well defined internally in sense of who actually rolls out these services and who performs each function of those services.
Right. Love that. Love that you're getting into the HR services too. That's probably, you know, for most firms, an uncomfortable place, but then we've all been thrust into having to manage furloughs and layoffs and benefits and sick time and just an enormous amount of employee issues this year. That just, you know, it impacts people's lives, and it's, you know, your clients are your friends too. And, it's, you know, an enormous investment. Huge need there. Huge.
Yeah. Well, it's really funny is after like completely getting rid of our payroll department last year, my business partner stumbles upon, I think it's called Rippling. It's like a payroll HR platform. It's pretty impressive. And he's like, and I'm like, we did this already. Remember what happened? He's like, but no, this platform's so amazing. And I'm like, maybe. And so he's actually switched us internally over to it to start testing it out. But I'm like, here we go.
But you know, it's awesome that you can keep testing new applications and keep growing your practice. And again, everything changes. I mean, you know, next year will be totally different than this year. So it's good to be flexible and nimble and be able to test out new apps that you can then cascade down to your clients and really add a lot of new value.
Absolutely.
I love the agility too. I mean, you've been with the company now for 6, almost 7 years, and you've got this agility baked into even at the enterprise level where you're okay with experimenting on what is the right pricing model. How do we bring this to the next level for the firm and for the client? And I just absolutely adore that. Sometimes it's like running through mud just to get, you know, having tech fee conversations of $50, you know, per client. It's still, for some firms, it is like running through mud. It's a very difficult thing to get everyone aligned and even engaged in that conversation. But with you, there's this experimentation that continues to go on, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, and like our poor staff, like bless their hearts, like we've like dragged them kicking and screaming with us. We're like, so we're doing this new thing, you know, and we've gone through definitely some, you know, growing pains. We got up to the point, it was last January, we were up to 10 or 11 employees. And then in March, April, we did a really sharp contraction down to 5 because we just realized for how fast we're growing, we don't have the systems we need. We don't have the processes in place. And we were getting some pushback internally as we tried to develop new things. And so we're like, you know what? We're just going to start from scratch again and kind of rebuild. And so it was definitely, there were some hard months there, but then when I look back at how far we've come, I'm like, ooh, this has been it sucked. And we had to try a lot of different things and a lot of different models, but I'm like, we're really happy with where we are right now. And so it's like, okay, I don't think we'll be inventing the wheel, at least for another year.
At least, right? You say. Yeah. We have it recorded, y'all. So,
yeah.
Thank you for watching Tax Pro Talk, brought to you by Intuit Pro Connect for tax and accounting professionals.
That's a funny thing with Intuit too. They tell us at the very beginning, look, if we're a change company, if you're not comfortable with change, might not be a good fit, consider it. But yeah, that's something, our design for delight cycles and things like that, we really do try to improve and change rapidly where we see opportunity. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mentality.